To Italy now, where at least 14 people have been killed in what are being called the worst floods in a century. More than 15,000 people in the country's north have been forced to leave their homes, and many are stranded with no electricity and dwindling food supplies. Authorities have called for residents to reduce their movements to a minimum in the infected region, which is still subject to a red weather alert. The same area was battered by extreme weather earlier in May, with at least 2 people dying during storms.
This may look like a peaceful town, but Fenza is anything but right now. Just around the corner, a near impossible battle is being waged against massive floodwaters that have left behind a muddy, destructive trail. Nothing has been spared. Florist Antonietta Bagnara set up her store 3 decades ago. She says most things here will now have to be junked.
I didn't think I'd ever open again, but then my friends said I would be acting my age if I couldn't muster the courage to do it. So I rolled up my sleeves and here I am. 30 years of my work has been wiped out in one night.
30 anni di lavoro andati via in una notte.
Bagnara's friends have pitched in with the cleanup. It's this support, the 60-year-old says, that's kept her going despite her loss. It's a sentiment widely shared here in Fenza. As authorities focus on getting people to safety, residents are taking matters into their own hands.
I'm lucky because my house has been spared. I'm here helping friends. Solidarity is needed and Faenza is doing a good job of providing it. I lost my ground floor, the cellar and garage flooded, but luckily there are a lot of people helping. Yesterday a lot of volunteers showed up too. We're quite lucky because if we were alone, we would have probably done nothing.
The Lamone River burst its banks here 2 days ago. It was the second time this month, after intense inundations in early May. The double disaster has left the small town reeling. Mayor Massimo Isola says more than 1,000 people have been evacuated and housed in shelters. Beyond the material loss, he says the psychological wounds will take time to heal.
The impact has been devastating for our city and for the personal histories of people who have lost their homes and whose lives were endangered.
Even for those helping residents with the cleanup, the personal price has been high. Khalid Digogi used to live in a ground floor apartment. The waters took everything. He woke to the sound of this tiled wall cracking before the waters gushed in. His 2 children and pregnant wife are now in an evacuation shelter. Dagogi, who works as a farmhand, is staying with a friend. He now has to begin the task of throwing out everything.
It's been 4 days without sleep. I'm functioning on coffee. As for the future, we're all worried. We don't know what it will bring. There's a big question mark.
There will be plenty of questions once the immediate danger is over. For now, there's work to do.
Well, for more, we can now speak to DW correspondent Sonia Falnikar, who is in the flooded region in northern Italy. So, Sonia, tell us how things are looking where you are.
Well, Mariana, the situation is still very grim in the flood-affected areas. It's begun to rain there again. We were yesterday in the town of Fenza. This is a small town about 50 kilometers southeast of Bologna. It has about 60,000 inhabitants. And we got there to really dramatic scenes of a massive cleanup with residents really covered in mud and sludge, using shovels and wipers and suction machines to pump out water from flooded cellars and basements. The shops there are completely destroyed. People have been evacuated from ground floor apartments. And the Lamone River there in that town burst its banks there 2 days ago for the second time in a month. As you mentioned, Italy, parts of northern Italy experienced intense flooding in early May. And this is a scene that we're seeing being repeated across towns and villages, with over 20 rivers and canals now known to have burst their banks.
Well, the cleanup, of course, is one challenge, but as we understand, there are still thousands of people who are stranded. How are rescue operations going to try and get those people to safer areas?
You're right. I mean, there is a massive rescue operation underway, but you're absolutely right that there are major challenges. Authorities here are speaking of more than 250 landslides in several regions. And we're getting reports of several mountainous villages still being cut off. So it's difficult to get rescue teams in there. In some places, there are widespread electricity outages. The phone lines are down. But despite that, there is an operation underway. You know, yesterday when we went to Fensa, we saw units of the Italian Army and the Coast Guard out in several towns and villages. There are helicopters, you can hear them in the sky, rescuing people from roofs and upper floors. There are also rescue teams who have come in from other parts of Italy to pitch in. Huge groups of volunteers also helping to get people out. People are being evacuated to shelters that the government has now set up in schools, in gyms and in sports stadiums.
So you mentioned the army has now been involved and the government has taken steps to set up shelters. How satisfied are people with the response of the government to this disaster?
Well, we spoke to the mayor of Fensa yesterday, and he basically said that, you know, his small town required much more funds, really a large amount of funding from the state, from the Italian government, in order to cope with the magnitude of this disaster. And the Italian government has certainly been criticized for not, you know, doing enough to cope with the challenges of climate change. Italy has seen a rise in extreme weather events, and this is one of them.
That was DW correspondent Sonia Falnecker reporting from northern Italy. Sonia, thank you.